Greetings my friends and welcome to this week's tactics video. Today I'm going to try and break down the new Sanguinary Guard in a squad of 6. We're going to lead them with Dante, we're going to lead them with a captain, and we're going to try them in the 2 main detachments. That would be Liberator Assault Group and the Angelic Host. And hopefully by the end of the video you'll know exactly what strats to play, you'll know exactly which characters to attach, and you'll know what these guys can actually achieve on the tabletop. So let's dive in to this week's tactics video. So thanks so much for being here for the weekly tactics video. Today we are talking about Liberator Assault Group and Angelic Host and the Sanguinary Guard. So I've been building new Blood Angels lists for a few weeks now. I've played a couple of games and I think the 6-man Sanguinary Guard definitely have some play. Even at the 300 points they've come in at, 50 points per model, James, a long-time channel supporter, said he would like to see the damage output of Sanguinary Guard with Dante versus a captain in lag with, I think he means Lance, the Angelic Host with the full rerolls. So basically, like, looking at the strats that we can fire against these guys and seeing just how well they can do. I have put out a couple of posts on both Discord and on YouTube saying that if you have suggestions for upcoming videos, please leave them. I'm going to be doing lots of videos basically every Friday. You guys know the drill. There'll be a new tactics video out to tell you a little bit about some of the best combos you can use with Blood Angels. And I saw this comment and it got me really interested, and I've actually met James. He flew all the way from Chicago to Scotland for a game of 40k against me. So yeah, I figured we'd do some maths. We'll jump into a bunch of options. There is a lot in this video, so let's dive in. Let's start with the Sanguinary Guard, and for this video we're only going to be really looking at damage output, and we're only really going to be looking at their melee damage output, which is a blade, which I'm going to call a sword, essentially, for this video. Strength 6, AP 3, 2 damage, or a spear, Strength 6, AP 2, 2 damage with Lance. So they can be led by Dante, and Dante's buff for them, really, in melee, is going to be +1 to hit. So he does give advance and charge bonuses as well, but we'll just be, for the video, be talking about the +1 to hit. And they can be led with a captain, and on the charge, they can give +1 to strength. So potentially get you to a break point in strength, and that can be meaningful, and I think by the end of the video you probably will agree it is meaningful. Now, I know these characters can do damage, and I know that they can do other stuff like free stratagems. Here you've got all the breakdowns. This is what we're going to be looking at in the video. We're going to be looking at the Liberator Assault Group and the Angelic Host, and we're going to take Dante plus swords, the captain plus swords, Dante plus spears, the captain plus spears. These are the APs, these are the weapon skills. The captain can do the potentially free CP usage. Dante will give you +1 to advance and charge, which is very useful if you're using the new advance and charge stratagem. And all these damage hits are 2 damage, and we are excluding Dante and the captain's attacks for this. We're just trying to see what is going to make your most effective Sanguinary Guard. There's things you can do, for example, like that captain now can have the enhancement that gives him sustained 3. Dante is now strength 10 when he charges, so he's pretty good as well. Essentially, he's got an AP 3 power fist with 9 attacks. So both the characters can get significant buffs and can do some damage. But for this video, and maybe that's another video, but for this video, we're talking about the Sanguinary Guard. So if at some point in this video you get some value, please consider hitting the likes up button. That is, I don't know, the thumbs up button, which is the like button. Please also consider subscribing if you're here and you haven't seen all my videos before. And remember, if you want to get notified every week when I go live, then you need to press the bell icon. A lot of people don't click the bell icon. If you click it, basically all it means is, like, on your phone, if you've got the YouTube app, when one of my new videos comes out, you just get a ping on your phone. Hey, new Blood Angels Commander video is out. You don't have to watch it. You know, a lot of time I get push notifications. I don't interact with them, but it's good to know. So you should probably click the bell button. So, assumption 1 for this video is swords are better than spears. So we're going to do some maths to prove my point. I've made 3 assumptions in this video, and this is assumption 1, and they might not all be right. So, basically I started with Dante in Liberator Assault Group, and I took Dante in the Angelic Host. We took no buffs. So this is like with no strats. This is just them charging. All the math in this video assumes that they are charging. So basically that means Liberator Assault Group are always getting 1 extra attack and always getting 2 extra strength. Unfortunately, Angelic Host, you get nothing for charging. So with no strats, when led by Dante, Liberator Assault Group does somewhere between 20 and 150% more damage. For example, against something like a Knight Castellan, you're only doing 4 damage here with Angelic Host. You're doing 11. That's about 150% more. And some of these numbers on maybe some of the other ones are much smaller. Like if you're fighting Angron, I guess he's got a very good invulnerable save. He's also probably a breakpoint where you're 5s to wound on both weaponry. So just the extra attack is the difference here. So Liberator Assault Group, 20 to 150% more damage against various targets. If you are a channel member, I do share all the presentations that I make, so you're able to download these slides for later if you want them, if you're a channel member or a patron. So consider doing that at the end of the video. Right, then we talk about spears. So with no strats, but using spears, the damage isn't as far apart, as in like spears are actually doing a little bit better here in terms of the difference. Spears aren't always doing that much more damage. I've got a slide that compares that in just 2 seconds. But you're still 80% off better damage output if you're using Liberator Assault Group. So again, Liberator Assault Group is better. Strength 8 with an auto lance built in is pretty good. And if we compare these two that we just looked at together, then you have like Liberator Assault Group, spears, and you can see the numbers. I've tried to always highlight the higher numbers in green. Any numbers that are even or orange. And then you've got swords, Liberator Assault Group and Angelic Host Swords. So swords perform better in the majority of cases. You can see here there's more green in the table with the swords. Even against units with solid and vulnerable saves due to extra attacks. Now it's really important to note that I purposely picked a bunch of units with invulnerable saves. Rubric Marines, invulnerable save, 5 up. Terminators, 4 up. 8-bound, 5 up. Float Drone, 5 up. Angron, 4 up. Knight Castellan, 5 up. The Gravis Marines, the bottom one, is the only unit that doesn't have an invulnerable save. So here's the interesting thing. The first 6 in every slide include invulnerable saves, and look how the swords perform. So the swords are losing a point of AP here in every single situation, because AP2 pushes all these units to an invulnerable save, except maybe the Castellan, right? The Castellan's got a 5 up and a 2 up save. So maybe the bottom 2 here. I guess my point is, if the swords are performing better, or very similar in a lot of cases, there is more green in the sword table, then you're always going to be better against swords, or always going to be better with swords, because the second you go into enemies that don't have invulnerable saves, swords will perform like another bit better. You know, if you worsen your opponent's armor save by a 1, yeah? If you are saving on a 5 and you move to saving on a 6, you've actually lowered your save percent by 50%, right? Because you would save basically 2 in 3 as opposed to, sorry, 1 in 3 as opposed to 1 in 6, right? So the second you start including units where they don't have invulnerable saves, the swords get even more. So it's really important to note that the swords are better in a lot of the situations when we aren't even getting the benefit from the extra pip of AP. We're only getting the benefit from the fact that the swords get 1 more attack. So if we move on, and we take a captain, right? And if we take no strats with the captain, the difference between the two is considerably less. The damage in the Liberator is down like 20%, and the improved wound roll has actually improved some angelic numbers. So that's a really interesting thing. So when you add a captain, Liberator Assault Group go up to strength 9. There's not a huge difference between strength 8 and 9, but over here you go from strength 6 to strength 7, and there is a bit of a difference between strength 6 and 7, because I guess strength 7 means you're wounding like 8-bound now on 3s, and you're no longer wounding knights on 6s, you're now wounding them on 5s. So the captain's actually pretty good here. The extra pip of strength is actually kind of meaningful for the Angelic Host. And if we take spears in the Angelic Host, and against the swords, again, the spears just very rarely, if ever, outperform. And if we put them together side by side again, you can see captain with the swords. There's arguably more green in here again. The reason that there is a little bit of green over here will be breakpoints, right? And what that means is there's always going to be a window of like the spears with +1 to wound at the exact same strength as the spears is potentially going to, like, you know, like there is breakpoints here. So you are You're never going to have a weapon like the swords that's going to perform better against everything all of the time. But in this situation, if it's performing better against like 5 out of the 7, and this is baseline, right? So when we start adding lance from our stratagems and stuff here, this is going to change. But like, the bottom line that I was seeing here is there's very few situations the spears are better. But it does happen, right? But then, even though they are better, like, look at the numbers. You're going from 13.3 damage with the swords to 14.2 damage with a spear, or you're going from 7.1 to 8. So basically what you're saying is, like, you are doing 1 more damage with the spear in this very one niche position, whereas if you come down to something like the Gravis Marines, with the swords, you're doing like 5 more damage or 4.5 more damage, right? So even though these are ahead, they're ahead like a negligible amount. So I think based on this data, and you're going to see this as we go further into this presentation, really, most of the time the swords are just going to be their better option. I think there's very few situations that you should ever really consider using the spears. But I mean, I leave that up to you. I never tell you you shouldn't use a weapon or anything like that. I'm just trying to give you as much data as humanly possible. Okay. So assumption number 2 for this video is Red Rampage is better than Unbridled Armor. Red Rampage gives you lance. Usually by default you want to take the lance, but you can take lethals as well, or you can take lethals instead. It's worth noting that it's not important for this video, but you can't take lance when you are charged, but you can take lethals when you are charged. Unbridled Ardor is the new stratagem for Angelic Host, which means you use it when one of your Adeptus Astartes units is destroyed, and then until the end of the battle, each friendly Sanguinary Guard that makes an attack against that unit can reroll hits and wounds. And it is worth noting that that is not specifically calling out for only melee hits. So you would be able to get rerolls, hits and wounds for shooting. Unfortunately, you only have 1 melta pistol and like 5 strength 4 bolters with no AP, but you will get reroll hits and wounds. So there is a second component to this. The caveat is you have to have something die to get the buff, right? Whereas obviously Red Rampage you don't, you just make your charge, you take lance or lethals. 90% of the time you probably want to take lance. But you can take both, and it is important to note that a Sanguinary Guard unit, if it has the banner, if it does take both and gets battle shocked, it's not the end of the world, because you still have 7 OC, if you still have 6 plus the character alive, because the banner's added after your OC is... So your OC gets reduced to 0, and then you get the +1 per model back from the banner. So you're still 7 OC, even if you use Red Rampage and Fall to Red Thirst. So you can use this much more freely, I guess. But this is actually really strong. But on paper, I honestly thought Liberator Assault Group would be a bit ahead here. So we went back to the table and we did Dante plus the swords plus Lance in Liberator Assault Group. And these are our numbers. And then Lance increases damage by about 50%. So I went back earlier in the slide and looked at the comparison I had a few slides ago and looked at it, and Lance is doing about a 50% increase in damage. Unbridled Ardor, on the other hand, is doing about a 100% increase in damage. Now, the interesting thing with Unbridled Armor is it's actually really strong against basically everything but the Knight Castellan, and that is because you would only wound on 6s here. Because you are strength 6, you're going into a Knight Castellan, which is T12, so, but against everything else, it's performing really well. You even see a couple of green things, again, sneaking in here. So I was honestly thinking, before I made this video, that Angelic hosts lists would struggle with damage output. I was thinking, they're not getting they don't have any strats that can really benefit the Death Company, right? No plus, I mean, maybe the way to play Angelic Host, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, is to put a chaplain in that Death Company to just... like, not an Astrath, not a Lamartas, an actual chaplain that just gives them +1 to wound all the time. Because Death Company do have some high strength weaponry, like Power Fists and Eviscerators. Maybe having +1 to wound would be the way to do it. But maybe that's another video in itself. But I was honestly thinking Unbridled Angelic Host would struggle with damage output. But if it's viable to take 2 units of Sanguinary Guard with 2 characters and you have the Sanguinary Guard in 6s, then these guys' damage output becomes really, really good. If you, like, the second you have full hit rerolls and wound rerolls, you know that your damage output gets a massive spike. This spikes up to just as good, just about as good as Liberator Assault Group with Lance, and we know that's strong because that has a whole extra attack and that has an whole extra 2 extra strength. So this is a really, really powerful strat on Bridled Armor for 1 CP. If we did this with the Captain, the Lance bonus becomes less, and I guess the reason the Lance bonus becomes less is because you move up to Strength 9, and again, there's literally only 1 breakpoint here. But the Strength 7 breakpoint here is meaningful as well, because I guess it makes 8 bounds easier to wound, it makes the Knight Castellans easier to wound, it makes the Gravis Marines easier to wound. So, and Bridled Ardor buff with the Captain with full rerolls to hits and wounds and Angelic detachment is also really, really strong. And then I put them side by side to try and see, is it better to have a Captain with the swords, or is it better to have Dante with the swords in both detachments? And my takeaway from this was, in Liberator Assault Group, Dante is king. So Dante is, you know, the two situations where the swords are like ever, or I think it's actually only one. There's one situation where the swords are ever so slightly ahead. So the extra strength here from the Captain is not as meaningful as the extra +1 to hit from Dante, right? For Liberator Assault Group. So Dante is really good in Liberator Assault Group, and like I said, he gets 9 strength 10 attacks now on the charge, and the AR AP3 with lethal hits. So he's basically got a lethal hitting AP3 power fist with 9 attacks. So Dante is, he's a little bit expensive, but he is very good for buffing the Sanguinary Guard and Liberator Assault Group. But here's the interesting thing, I guess, like the Captain with that meaningful extra strength against Dante and the Angelic host, the Captain is very strong. Like, he's a tiny bit behind on the rubrics and the Terminators, but then he comes ahead on the 8 bounds. He tiny bit behind on Angron, much stronger against strength 12, and this might be, or toughness 12, and this might be meaningful. Like, this is, you know, 50 or 60% more damage against toughness 12. So if you are expecting to play enemies that have a lot of toughness 12 stuff, there's a very strong argument to say both units of Sanguinary Guard could be led by a Captain. But I think in general, I think in the Angelic host, Dante is still not bad, and Dante is actually still really good if you can get that Unbridled Armor off against just about everything except toughness 12 and above, right? So basically you could easily take Dante +6, the Captain +6, and if the enemy have like a couple of big knights, you're like, right, my Captain-led Sanguinary Guard need to deal with the knights, and Dante and his Sanguinary Guard can deal with everything else, or even they could deal with toughness 10 knights, right? Because Angron's T11 and these guys do 13 wounds against an Angron. Angron's a bit more durable and a bit more survivable than like an Armiger, so arguably Dante plus the Sanguinary Guard could eat up an Armiger pretty easily. Potentially you could even multi-charge and put all the Armigers all the Sanguinary Guard into one Armiger and Dante into the other, and just probably end up with like one Armiger left with a handful of wounds, right? So that was Dante with the swords. I then wanted to do lethal hits as well, right? And I wanted to see just how much extra lethal hits could improve the damage, because I was actually surprised, I suppose, at this point that the reroll hits and wounds with Angelic Host did so much. I was expecting it to be good, but I wasn't expecting it to be this good. Like, my second assumption was that Red Rampage was a superior stratagem. So I added the Lance, and I added the lethals. And I did that for both the Captain and Dante, and adding the lethals adds about 20% more damage, right? It makes sense, because basically it's a 16% chance you roll a 6 when you're rolling to hit, and that is an auto wound, so it would make sense that increased damage output by somewhere in the region of 16%, so 16 to 20%. So you do get a little bit further ahead in both situations, I guess, if you use lethals and Red Rampage. And like I said, you can use that for free. And you can still have OC. Well, you can't use it for free, but you can use it and still have OC, right? Okay, so then I decided to jump back to the spears, because I figured someone would say if I stopped doing any maths for the spears halfway through, and it might be worth just seeing the spears carry through. So lethals, because the spears already have lance. Lethals again adds about 20% to the spears, and you can see the numbers here for how much the spears did. So then it would make sense. So I did that for Dante, and I did that for the captain, and then I put it all together to basically say, like, Dante with the spears, the captain with the spears, with the rerolls and all that, who performs better, right? On the left columns here, you can see that for the most part, Dante with the rerolls to wound, or the lance and lethals is always slightly ahead of this captain in all situations with the spears. But the spears aren't really, like, spears feel to me like they're second rate. And I've got another slide after we move into the winners to show you that it's just, you should be using the swords. And here you go, right? So like Dante plus the swords, here's the numbers. Dante reroll hits and wounds, bang, right? So again, like I mentioned this before, the only thing that Dante is bad against is the Castellan. Everything else, you look at these numbers, there's very little difference in them. Swords are always ahead, and bear in mind, like I said earlier in the video, in all these situations, swords are actually losing one of their AP. So the second you fight any unit like this that doesn't have an invulnerable save, the swords get even better. So there's almost no point to take the spears. If we look at the captain and Dante with the rerolls and the swords, and the Dante with the rerolls, so you've got for both detachments again. I'm just going to move myself a tiny little bit so I don't block any of these numbers. So again, you can see if we look at the sword numbers, every number is a little bit higher. Maybe like these two are basically the same number if you compare them over here. And then again, Dante, it's the same, it's higher, it's higher, it's the same, it's the same. The Castellan's bad, it's way higher. And then a final slide for this section where we just look at the swords across the two with lance and lethals. You can see your Dante is definitely ahead, and then the captain is very, very similar to Dante in most situations. You lose a point or two of damage against everything, but you gain a ton of damage against those toughness 12 and up targets. So, my next assumption and the final assumption, and I think assumption number 2, I suppose, was that Red Rampage was a lot better than Unbridled Ardor, and I think that was the wrong assumption. Like, Unbridled Ardor is an amazing stratagem. If you can get units to die, which is possible, you could take Scouts, you can take Jump Assault Intercessors, you can even use Angel Sacrifice, so you could jump in a unit of Jump Assault Intercessors into your opponent, have them sacrifice, your opponent has to kill them, then instantly play Unbridled Ardor to get full hits and wounds reroll for the Sanguinary Guard that charge the same target. That is a very, very strong combo. Assumption number 3 was, I thought Oath of Moment would benefit the captain more than it would benefit Dante, right? And the reason behind that is the captain hits on 3s, which is a 66% chance. So if we reroll our hits, we increase our chance to hit to 88. That is an increase of 22%. Whereas Dante hits on 2s, which is 83. If he rerolls his hits, he goes up to 97, which is an increase of like 14%. So this might be the final math slide where we included Oath of Moment for Liberator Assault Group. So you can see the swords, which we've deemed definitely the best weapon. Liberator Assault Group with Lance, Lethals, and Oath against the reroll hits and wounds of Angelic. So this is the actual difference with the maximum buffs you could get. And then with the captain, right? And I think what I came away with from this was that basically Dante is a great pick in every situation except toughness 9 enemies, because that is a strength 9 weapon. So this is the one break point where the captain is slightly better in Liberator Assault Group. But like if you're going to be running Liberator Assault Group and 6 Sanguinary Guard, I've been using Dante plus 6 for like since the Codex came out. It is very good. It is kind of your best option, except in that odd case where you fight strength toughness 9 because of the breakpoint. The captain is very good in Angelic Host, but so is Dante. He's better than I thought he would be, but you're going to need that unbridled armor to really unlock both these numbers, right? Without it, these numbers are very average. So that's the difficult part of this detachment. And I think that's probably why you will see professional players are really king top tier players playing Angelic Host and doing really well. But normal scrubs, am I including myself as a normal scrub? I don't know if I want to necessarily say scrubs, but like maybe not the top level players. They are going to struggle in this. The strength of this detachment, a huge portion of its strength, is unlocked from that stratagem. And I didn't realize just how much before I made this video. But the captain is a strong all-round choice. So both detachments can do well with captains. Both detachments can do well with Dante. Let's go back to the assumptions real quick. And just, this was a summary so I'm clear. Swords are better than spears in 90% of situations. Like I said, including a lot of invulnerable saves. So swords are even better if you're into enemies that do not have invulnerable saves. Red Rampage is better than Unbridled Armor. This is wrong. Unbridled Armor gives a massive increase in damage. It was like 150% damage into some of those things. I guess combined with that captain hitting that breakpoint against the high toughness stuff. Like one of the things that I said about this detachment, Angelic Host, was it was going to struggle with like T10 and above. While Unbridled Armor would be like your ace in the hole. And maybe we need to make another video about chaplains in that detachment. Because I guess if you can figure out the niche of how you kill those armor targets, then I think this detachment could actually be really difficult to deal with. And this is probably more meaningful than I'd given it credit before. I'm okay to admit when I'm wrong. Okay, and then Oath of Moment will benefit the captain more than it will benefit Dante. It does actually benefit the captain more than it benefits Dante, but Dante still performs better because +1 weapon skill is always useful, right? You're always going to get a benefit from 1 extra weapon skill, while +1 strength only matters sometimes. So that's why overall Dante is just a much better choice. But if you're playing that Angelic Host and you're struggling to kill armor, then that is where maybe the captain could be the secret to unlocking that for you. So, in Liberator Assault Group, it's important to remember you have the banner for the Sanguinary Guard, so that adds 1 after the battle shock, meaning units are still OC1, even if they fall to Red Thirst. Take Lance and Lethals, and I guess, like, I fought a knight this week with 6 Sanguinary Guard and Dante. One of the Sanguinary Guard actually died when my transport exploded, so it was 5 Sanguinary Guard with Dante. I took the Lance and the Lethals, and I killed like a 25 wound T12 knight in 1 turn. I believe I'd Oath of Momented it as well. Statistically, should that have killed it? Maybe, well, not quite, because I actually, like I said, one of my Sanguinary Guard already died, so maybe that was a little bit of a swingy roll. But yes, Dante plus 6 Sanguinary Guard, taking Lance and Lethals, potentially using Oath of Moment. That is very powerful. Dante will give you the best damage output. He also has the Battle Shock aura, which can be useful, and he synergizes nicely with Advance and Charge, giving +1 on both roll. In Angelic Host, having cheap disposable units which can die to give your Sanguinary Guard that important buff is going to be meaningful. So I think if you're going to run Angelic Host, like, I could be wrong here, but I might go out on a limb and say you just want 3 units of Scouts, which you forward deploy all 3. You want 3 units of Jump Intercessors. And as much as you want to do actions with these things, you also want to sacrifice them in key moments to get those full hit and wound rerolls against what you need to get them against. If you're going to have to go after toughness 12 or higher, the captain is going to be super useful in this detachment because of the breakpoint. Dante is very good in this detachment as well. However, when you only wound on 6s, it's far too swingy, it's not reliable, you're never going to kill what you need to kill. So generally, if you're coming up against T12 and above, do not charge Dante and the Sanguinary Guard into that in any situation. Go for something else in the map. Which does make me think in that detachment, maybe the argument is to have 2 captains, because I feel like it's more flexible. Depending on you going to a tournament, you don't know what you're playing against, lots of different armies. But I think Dante, you could go Dante plus 6, captain plus 6, and you could actually still do really, really well. maybe you just need one more unit in your army, like a 10 death company led by a chaplain. You're going to rapid ingress that can also kill armor, and then you feel good. I generally think it's like bad if you only have one unit that can kill armor, and a lot of people are doing angelic hosts with lots of inceptors. Inceptors don't really kill armor. I know they're strength 8 with twin linked, but I still think they're not really designed to destroy armor. So and then swords are equal or better in just about every situation. Maybe there's the super edge play where you can do something with spears, but I'm going to be taking my Sanguinary Guard all with swords. So that was a frig load of maths this week, and we're not finished yet. There's an ace in the hole. In the Angelic Host, you can, for 1 CP, get lethal hits and precision, right? That's another stratagem you have. It's not that great. We already discussed earlier, lethal hits is going to give you like a 20% uplift in damage. But if we've established the captain as the decent choice for this detachment, and we're going to be re-rolling all our hits, which means all our 1s and 2s can potentially also be re-rolled into lethals to help the Sanguinary Guard. And then potentially you've also got a crap load of precision here, right? Because all your melee weapons have precision. So you could have like 30 plus attacks with damage to precision. So you're definitely going to be able to snipe out any characters if you want. How does this change? So if you add lethal hits and you already had rerolls to hit and wounds, and you're in the angelic detachment, I get 2 sets of numbers for you. The yellow numbers, like the spears, and the yellow numbers here, your damage goes up about 5%. And then the green numbers, your damage goes up about 10%, because you already have all those built-in rerolls, hits, and wounds. I guess the lethals, although they are meaningful, they're not as meaningful as potentially they were before. So with the swords, again, the swords just get more benefits from these buffs, it seems like. So I guess it's more hits, it's more lethals, and it gives you a lot of potential precision, right? 19 damage coming out against the Castellan Knight in this detachment with full hits and wound rerolls with the captain, with the lethals. So you can see already that this detachment is down a bit from where we were with Dante plus Liberator Assault Group and as many of the buffs that we could get over there. So here's my overall conclusion on this. Liberator Assault Group is going to be much easier to play, right? You just simply charge, you activate Red Thirst, boom. Dante gives you insane threat range, right? +1 to advance and +1 to charge. He gives you the solid hit chance, and that potentially lets you keep your Oath of Moment for another target. And this is one of the reasons I've been playing Dante now for like 3 months, and it's one of the reasons that I won the GT that I did with Dante. I feel like you can use Oath of Moment if you needed to, if you feel like you're desperate to do maximum damage, but a lot of the time having +1 to hit means that hitting on 2s is good enough. I mean, Dante's squad is getting 39 2 damage hits at AP3 now. So if you think 39 AP3 hits at strength 8 with potentially lance and lethals, do you need Oath of Moment? I feel like it at least frees up Oath of Moment to be used elsewhere. And that's why I like Dante. And that's maybe one of the ways that you could get the most out of the Sanguinary Guard, is if you are running 2 squads, one's led by Dante to not need Oath of Moment, the other one's led by the captain, which is also a good choice. We showed that. Like I said, the captain can also take sustain 3 once per game as well, and you can give him Oath of Moment. If you did that, then you could potentially fish for 6s with your sustain 3. Oath of Moment could be pretty useful. I would say if any time your Sanguinary Guard are going to charge an enemy that +1 to wound is only going to wound on a 4-up, I think you should fall to the Red Thirst and take lethal hits. So for example, like I was charging a knight, I know I'm only going to wound the knight on 4-ups, take the lethals. I'll just get, like if you're throwing 39 dice, you're probably going to roll 6 or 7 lethals. Hopefully that means that if you have a good 4-up roll, you kill your target. If you have a bad 4-up roll, sometimes you have like 30 dice to roll, you need to roll 4-ups, maybe you only get 10 4-ups. Well, at least you had those 7 lethals at the start, right? So that's sort of my advice on that. If your lance is going to let you wound on 3s or 2s, I would say it's up to you whether you take the lethals. I also think, like, if you are going to be hitting on 2-up with Dante, it's possibly okay to reroll some of your hits here, because for every 1 you get, you potentially get another lethal. Sometimes you can spike some 6s. So there's potential there if you're fighting a knight or something and you both have momented it. Maybe you just want to fish for those lethal hits, because that can help, and maybe that gets you like 10 lethals before you even get to the wound roll. Yes, you lose a few, you know, you roll 3 or 4 1s, but do you care about 3 or 4 1s if you're going into your wound roll with already 10 lethals? That's up to you, right? A captain with oaths is about 20 or 30% behind Dante in terms of raw damage value. Without oaths, sorry. And with oaths, it drops to as little as 5%. So Dante, without oaths, 20 or 30% better than the captain. With the captain, it becomes much closer. So I guess my point here of maybe Dante charges 1 unit without oath, the captain with the other unit charges something else with oath. That could be possibly the best way to be playing Sanguinary Guard in Liberator Assault Group, going into the new points and new codex that are coming out any week now, right? In the Angelic host, I previously said I felt this detachment was going to struggle into high toughness enemies. Yeah, it's one of the reasons I actually haven't played the detachment yet, is because I thought it was going to struggle. And I think that criticism may still be valid. You will need to be like playing at top tier on point, and what I mean by that is your sacrificial units and angel sacrifice plays are going to have to be perfect to get the unbridled armor when you need it against the hardest targets. The captain leading the Sanguinary Guard and ensuring that some units are sacrificed will allow unbridled armor to actually give you crazy damage output. The +1 strength to reach strength 7 is critical for dealing with those T12 enemies. Dante's unit could inflict serious damage into lower toughness enemies, and I think anytime a unit dies, if you're playing in the Angelic host, you should honestly probably just consider unbridled armor. And here's the thing, there's nothing that says you can only run 2 units of Sanguinary Guard. Like, I've already seen someone making a list with 2 6s and then a single 3, and I guess a single 3 normally doesn't seem that impactful, but full rerolls to hits and wounds, even 3 Sanguinary Guard could mop up some units there. With a strat active on the captain, I think it's at least comparable to Liberator Assault Group Captain with the Lance and Lethals. So, yeah, I think Unbridled Armor can do quite a lot of heavy lifting for this attachment. And maybe there's some other units that we can figure out to get a lot of heavy lifting for this attachment. I know this has been a ton of information today. Thank you if you've stuck with me to the very end. I actually thought this was going to kind of be an easier video on it. And sometimes my videos grow arms and legs. But I think, at least at the end of it, we got like 3 key takeaways, right? Dante's probably always better for lag. Swords are definitely always better. And then Unbridled Armor is super strong, and captains are actually really meaningful for Angelic Host. So if you did get to the end of the video and you enjoyed it and you feel like you learned something, I put everything on the screen that you can do to help me out. There are a bunch of affiliate links and Patreon links and all this sort of stuff in the video description. Thank you everybody that supports the channel, that subscribes, that leaves me a comment. You guys mean the world to me. This last few weeks have been pretty crazy on the channel. We are edging towards 20,000 subscribers. So if you've got any Blood Angels players that don't know about, Blood Angels friends, Blood Angels players that don't know about the Blood Angels Commander, please consider sharing this video with a friend. I will catch you sometime live in the next week or so, and I'll be back next Friday with a new tactics video. Remember, every Sunday night we do review community submitted army lists. So that happens every Sunday night. We've been building that show for like 4 years now. So come hang out 8 PM Sunday night, and we'll talk about army lists. And if you want to submit your army to the show to be on a future episode, you're more than welcome to do this. Have a great weekend, brothers. Thank you so much for watching. I've been John, the Blood Angels Commander, and I will see you next time. By the blood are we made strong. Peace.